move. I want to thank you all for your patience. It has been a long 2.5 weeks. This video should have been out 2.5 weeks ago, but I ran into some equipment issues. And I think I have finally got them solved for the immediate future anyway. We are here with our very first block. It is the Poppy, and this is our 2024 block of the month. It is raw edge applique. It is slow stitch. I absolutely loved it. This block went together relatively quickly, and I really enjoyed doing it. The only delay was the issue with my equipment. Let's get started. I have my background fabric and I have my batting here. I have a piece of lace tablecloth that I said I was going to use for these blocks. I have another piece of beautiful silk chiffon-like fabric with a little bit of metallic in it. Not exactly sure where I'm putting any of these things or how I'm putting any of these things. Just trying to make a pleasing arrangement. These things can go anywhere you like, keeping an eye on things and making sure it's still recording. I have some poppy fabric that I absolutely love. It's called Poppy Days by Alexa Kate Designs by Studio E Fabrics. I have a piece of it right here, and it has small bunches of poppies that I'm cutting out as I want, and they also have some adorable little butterflies and bugs, some bees and whatnot. So I've been cutting some of those out, and my thought process is that I'll be placing these in the background. I've cut some of them out, and I'll be placing some little bugs here and there. I also have some of this fun little trim that can go places here and there, wherever you care to put them. Okay, so far this file seems to be recording. That's a good thing. The last time I've done this like 20 times already today, and the files get lost, they don't get saved, I don't know what happens, things freeze. So I'm at the end of my rope here. I have my basic layout that I'm happy with, and at this point I'm going to start sewing these pieces down using some slow stitching, and I will mostly be using either seed stitch, running stitch, or blanket stitch. And I'm thinking that for the background I will probably use this type of pearl cotton. This is from Wonderfill, and it is a number 8 pearl cotton, and I will probably be using this or 3 strands of embroidery floss in a coordinating color, something along the blue and green and yellow shades. And I have taken a sashiko needle. These are tulip sashiko needles, and I have a link to them. If you go into the video description, you'll find a link to my Amazon store, and I've got these set for you in that list. This is an assortment of 6 different sizes of sashiko needles. I've taken 3 strands of embroidery floss, and I'm going to make a very simple knot on my needle by holding the tail, wrapping it around the needle a few times, pinching it with my finger, and then pulling the thread through, and it makes a really nice little knot. So I'm taking my embroidery floss, and I'm just using that sashiko needle and that sashiko thimble right here. And what this does is it allows the back of the needle to sit there, and you will be sewing kind of like this. So you're going to be pushing the needle through the fabric, and it will be pushing up against this thimble rather than the palm of your hand. I'm just taking some random sized running stitches, and I'm just catching these elements down to the background, and you don't have to be worried about the length of your stitches or how many stitches, or this stitching is enough just to hold things down in lieu of basting. You can use a regular sewing thread or a thinner embroidery floss needle. What I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to stitch a spiral coming out from here. Now I'm using a pale yellow embroidery floss. I'm using 3 strands, and I'm just going to start here and kind of spiral my way out. I'm doing my stitches small enough that I can actually catch the lace in my stitches. And this is not going to be a perfect spiral, and I'm not at all concerned by that. All right, I wanted to come back and just show you that I've changed the color from such a pale yellow to a darker yellow. It's a little bit easier for you to see now, but one thing I wanted to mention is that when you are doing a line of stitching, you want to smooth it out as you pull the needle through. So now I'm pushing it down and I'm doing this. And that just relieves any gathering that the needle may have done into the fabric. This way you don't have any puckers. So just smooth out your line of stitches. You can see it's a little gathered there. So I'm just putting it down like that and smoothing it out, just making sure that there's no puckers. I wanted to come back and give you a tip on tying off your knots. You can see that I have some knots here, but if you prefer not to have any knots in the back, you can take your thread that you're trying to tie off and you can slip it into the batting and go back and forth several times. And then you can clip your thread and you will have no knot. It'll be nice and smooth. And now I've switched to one of these variegated number 8 pearl cottons, and I'm going to start working on this piece here. I'm going to start by doing a blanket stitch along the edge of the piece. And to do the blanket stitch, you're going to come up from the back of your fabric, and if you want your stitch to be about 1/4 of an inch long, then this will be your imaginary line here for the base of the stitch. So what I'm going to do is I am going to go back down into the fabric diagonally down to the base of where I want my stitch. We're not going to pull it tight. So now we're going to come up at where the top of the next stitch should be. Okay, and that is your blanket stitch. Now we're going to go back down here and we're going to come up here, all the while holding that loop. Go back down here and come up at the top and catch that loop. Do it a couple more times for you. And you don't want to pull real tight because this will make the fabric pucker. And we're going to go back in the fabric where we want the next stitch to be and come up at the top. And we're not pulling tight. Okay, I'm approaching a corner and I wanted to show you how to do the corner. So we're going to keep our loop up and out of the way and go back down and up as usual, catching that loop like that, not pulling tight. And now I'm going to go back down in the same spot and I'm going to come up at the corner. Okay, like that. And now I'm going to go down in the same spot and come up again at the edge, catching the loop. And now I have successfully turned the corner. I have the blanket stitch all done, and I didn't tell you, but to finish a blanket stitch, you're going to continue like you're making the next stitch, but instead of coming back down here, you're going to go right next to where you just came up. So I'm going to be making some X's, plus signs, crosses, whatever you like to call them, and I'm just going to go down diagonally from where I came up and then come up again, and then go back down. So like you're doing cross stitch. Just like that. And we're just going to put them willy-nilly, anywhere you want them. If you like to do it in a straight line, you can do that. If you want to try and speed things up, you can go diagonal there and then come back up diagonal here. And then keep going down the other direction like that. I wanted to pop back on and show you my progress on doing the backgrounds. I did the square spiral here, and then I was just in the mood for some seed stitch. So I did some, they kind of looks like birthday sprinkles, and I absolutely love the way it looks. And then over here I decided to do some daisy stitch just to fill in this area, and I will zoom in and show you how to make this stitch. It's very easy, not too bad at all. So I just finished on the French knot there. So I'm going to come up at the center of my flower right there. And I'm going to go back down in the same spot. But before I pull all the thread through, I'm going to come up a good bit away in the direction that I want my petal to point. And if you say, well, I'd like my petal a little bit closer together, then you can do that. Okay, and again, don't pull tight, just snug it up like that. And then you're going to take a tiny stitch basically in the same spot and go down, and that will lock your petal in. And then once again, you come up at the center and you just snug that up gently, and then you are ready to make your next petal. Go back down in the same spot, come back up in the center, and don't pull. And if you accidentally do pull, just loosen it up a wee bit. So if you are a fan of the show The Chosen, season 4 has just started coming out in theaters, and I went to go see episodes 1 through 3 today, and I will tell you, you're going to need your Kleenex. You're going to need a whole box and then some. So buckle up, it's going to be a rough season. And now I'm going to come up in the center, and we're going to do a French knot. Okay, so to do the French knot, you can make them as large as you want or as small and delicate as you want. I'm doing 4 wraps. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I snug it up and I go back down right about where I came up. And I'm just going to hold it closely here and pull down and snug it up, and then you've got your little French knot. Here are the poppies from the poppy fabric that I cut out, and they are going to get placed randomly on the piece. I've got one little lonely one here, and I was just going to tuck that back behind the lace like that, and I have 2 like that. And then I've got, so for these stems, I'm thinking of a color like this or another color, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to be using 6 strands of embroidery floss, so the full width. And if you wanted to get really fancy, you could do 3 strands of this and 3 strands of that, and you'd get, you know, different colors. But I'm going to extend and stitch down the stems, and I'm just going to willy-nilly have them coming up. So I'll be doing kind of like a running stitch in the shape of the stem, and then I will be taking the thread when I reach the end of the stem. I will be taking the thread and weaving it in and out of the running stitches all the way up, and it gives a fuller stitch, and it gives it a nice little bumpiness that I like. So I'm going to start by coming up at the beginning of this stem, and then I'm going to make a running stitch. So I started here and I've just jumped off the flower fabric. And now we're going to go backwards. You're going to take the eye of your needle. That is my first stitch. So I'm taking the eye of the needle and pushing it through, and there. Now, taking the eye of the needle and going in the other direction of the next stitch. Again, we're not pulling taut, and it's going to give it a nice little waviness to it. So that is your stem. And if you wanted to make it a wee bit thicker, what you can do is you can start going in the other direction, and that'll make it a thicker stem. And it gives it a little bit of a chain stitch. And again, if you like it a little bit thicker, then you could also, instead of doing this, you could take some yarn or some thin ribbon and couch it down. I have all the stems stitched on here, and I really like the way they look. Now I've changed to a slightly lighter color of thread, and I am going to start making these leaves. And I'm using the fly stitch, and to do that you come up at one point of the leaf, and then you go back down on the opposite point, and then before you finish pulling the thread through, you get your needle on the spine of the leaf, and then you go back down. So it's very similar to the daisy stitch. Now I'm going to go back up to the point of my next leaf, and you can exaggerate these leaves. They don't have to be exactly where this one is. And now I'm going to go back down, and then before I finish going through, I'm going to come up at the spine. Now when I get to the edge of this leaf, I'm going to go back down with a stem stitch to outline the leaf. And the stem stitch is just a slightly overlapping running stitch. So I came up, I went down, and now I'm coming up at about the middle of the length of that stitch. So I'm overlapping it, and then I'm going back down. And then I'm coming up about the middle of that stitch, overlapping it, and then going down. And I did the stitching around these flowers, and I'll show you how I'm doing that. I have one left that I have to do. And I also went around where like the petals fold over in front of the flower, just to give it a bit of definition. And I think I will also come back and do some black French knots in the centers. It'll be a little bit easier for you to see. And there's no right or wrong way. You know, you don't have to put 15 in each spot. You can just put as many as you feel like putting. So I have my needle and I have the thread, and I'm going to wrap it around the needle, and I'm going to wrap 4 times. And I am using black embroidery floss, and I'm using all 6 strands. 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'm just going to stick my finger there to hold it tight. Maybe if I turn it sideways, you can see it there. I have all of the French knots done, and I've taken several pieces of that really thin green fabric, greenish blue fabric that I tore. I cut it in I snipped the pieces at about 1/2 inch, and I went down about 1/2 inch, long enough so that I had something to hold on to and tear. And then I cut them at different lengths. And I have also taken pieces of this green trim that I had, and I have cut a few of them, and I'm going to sew those down. And I'm going to leave it exactly the way it's laying there, with all the little twists and turns in it. And I'm just going to take some large running stitches And that is how the grass is going to look. And when I'm done sewing the grasses down, I'm going to sew these down. And on these, I'm going to be taking tiny couching stitches. I tried the velvet and it does not work. So I'm going to use this piece of cotton. It matches the color of the poppies on the fabric very, very well. It's an orangey red. I'll start about here, and I'm just going to draw a random petal. There's one. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you can play around with it if you want. I am going to go over to the sewing machine. I'm going to sew around these with a small straight stitch. I'm using a 2mm straight stitch. It does not matter what color your thread is. It's not going to show, but you can of course use a matching color if you so desire. I have sewn all the way around my petals, and I am just going to trim the fabric down to about 1/8 of an inch or so. Now on these concave curves, I am going to clip, and I'm going to clip almost up to the stitching line. Almost, not quite. There won't be a lot of stress on this seam, so you don't have to go quite as close. And now I'm going to stick my finger in there. I'm going to go up to a far corner here. I've got my finger, the curve of the tip of my finger right at the curve of this seam here. And I'm going to go like that. And then I'm going to do it again over on this corner and pinching it like this and pulling it backwards. Now I'm going to take my turner here and I'm just going to use it to push out the corners. And I'm going to push out until I can just see the stitching line there. And my thought is I'm just going to tuck this under. I'm not going to worry about stitching it closed because I'm going to be taking it and pleating it, kind of like that. I've pressed this, so now let's see how it reacts when I pleat it. And actually, I kind of like it. I think that'll stand up nicely. I'm going to take a gathering stitch at the bottom, basically sewing this down. And then I'm going to take another one, and I'm going to flip it inside out, and I'm going to cup it around this way. And I have my petals. And I did make them larger than these because they're supposed to be closer. All right, I'm having to do this over again because the app crashed and it did not record the video. So I apologize for that, but we're just going to go with it and move on. And I will explain to you what I've done here. So I've taken, actually I'll take all this out and do it as I tell you and basically just show you what I did. I am using a matching color red thread, and I am going to just put a wee bit of pleating or gathering on the bottom of the petal, and that will make the outside curve and look like a real flower. And I'm going to just do some tiny stitches here just to hold it together, keep those pleats in place. I'm going down real far, and this stuff will be covered by the black center of the flower. Now I still have the thread here, and that's exactly where I want it. And I am going to take this petal and push it up a wee bit and lay this one right behind it. Mash it in there good and get it sewn. And that's why I don't have the backing fabric on yet, because this is gonna look sloppy and I don't want that on the back. So once these flowers are done, we will put our backing fabric on, and then we can do some quilting, either by hand or machine. I think I'm going to stick with hand. So the only machine work on here was making these petals. But this is not difficult. You can certainly do this. And this design kind of came to me when I was daydreaming, and I thought it would work. There are 2 of the petals, and you can see they have a little bit of life to them. And I'm trying to make a very small center. I'm trying to attach them very close to one another and really get them tucked in there. I don't want a really big opening here. That would work. That would work. Yes, sirree, Bob.
Sirree, Bob. No, sirree, Bob.
So I am going to make more of these petals and tuck them back around like that. And then there'll be one final petal that comes over here like that and gets sewn down. And then we're going to have our button. The petal fell out. The inside petal fell out. So what I did was I curled it back up and I wedged it down into the second petal, and I went over to my sewing machine and I sewed it closed. And then I unfolded this back up the way I wanted it and went over to the sewing machine and sewed it down again. So now I'm going to take this piece of fabric and find a pleasing manner of wrapping it around here, kind of like that. And then we're going to sew it down and we'll sew on the stems. I have the bud the way I like, and I've wrapped the green around it. I am just taking some small stitches along this back seam here, to try and hold the green on. And right at the moment, I'm only going through the green fabric. I'm not going through. I have added a stem, and I've got another one here, and I'll show you and I'll tell you how I made this. I took 3 strands of embroidery floss, full 6 strands each, and I made a braid. I braided it and then folded it in half to give me the stem. And that is what I'm using, and that's what I put over here. And Dash is running around in circles chasing her tail. This is the bloom, the bud that I'd finished. That has been stitched down, and this is the stem for the second full poppy. And I'm just sticking it under there, just shoving it under there with my finger, and I will stitch it down, and then I'm just going to give it a nice gentle little curve. And I'll do that couching it, and I'll be using two strands of sewing thread to do that. And then I'm going to do the fly stitch and stem stitch to outline the leaves. And I have more leaves here ready to go. And then of course we have to do our buttons. And once we do that, this block will be ready for the backing. I'm going to forego putting the backing on for now. We have the batting and that's it. When we go to put the rest of the blocks together, I will of course show you how to put a backing on here, how to do some quilting around the block to make sure that it is quilted down so we can truly say this is quilt as you go. And when we assemble the quilt, we have a couple of different methods that I was thinking about. One was a cover strip method where I take a 2-inch wide piece of fabric like this, and you sew it 1/4 inch over like that, and then you butt up the next block next to it, and then you fold one end over and you sew it down like that, and that's your cover strip. So the joins of the blocks are done with these cover strips and you don't see them, it just looks like sashing. Or I had another idea where we would bind this like we would bind a quilt, and then attach with buttons, with fancy antique fun buttons. We would attach button straps. So if you want your poppies in the upper left today, but tomorrow you want the pink rose, you can swap out the blocks with the buttons. Hi Dash. Hello lovey. So there's that thought, and I'm going to let that gel for a while and see how far I get with it. I have taken 3 strands of embroidery floss, full 6 strands, 2 in one color, 1 in another, and I've made a braid. And now I am going to double it, and I'm going to twirl it a wee bit, and that will be the stem for the bud. I have taken a length of jewelry wire that I have, and I folded it in half, and I put the braid where I doubled it over onto the loop of the wire. Let's do it this way and see if that works any better. There we go. Yep. Okay, I'm going to give this a bit of a twist like I've done on the others, and a bit of a curve, kind of like that. And I'm going to couch it down. All right, I have a single strand of number 8 pearl cotton, variegated. I'm coming up on one side of the leaf, like that. And I'm going down on the other side of the leaf. And I'm imagining the spine of the leaf kind of swerving through the center of that leaf. And I'm leaving a loop. And then I'm coming up where the spine would be, like that. And I'm going through the loop that I've left. And that will make a triangular shape or a chevron shape. And I'm going back down the same hole that I came up on. I have cut out a few of these bees that were on the fabric, and I am going to use some fabric glue to glue them down to the flowers. And I'm doing that because if I were to try and stitch this down, even with just one strand of embroidery floss, because of all the angled cuts, it would end up shredding. So this little itty bitty bit of glue is not gonna cause any problems. I have scattered some of my buttons around on the fabric. I am going to use some yellow embroidery floss to sew them down. Here is our first block in the 2024 Floral Raw Edge Applique Slow Stitching Block of the Month. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you learned a lot. Hope you learned how that it's so simple to make a nice 3D flower. Not as difficult as you think it would be. And if I can do this, you most certainly can do this. I want to thank you so much for being so patient with me. I apologize profusely. My phone was full and it refused to let me record anymore. And every time I tried to move stuff off, it took forever. I had to wait and wait and wait several hours for files to transfer. So I just was having difficulty, and I hope that I have found the solution now for that. And I apologize again for being so late with the January block. But the great thing about YouTube is my videos will be here forever, and you can refer back to them at any time. And I hope that the extra delay in time gave you more time to prepare and to think about it and to enjoy the excitement of the project. So here it is again. You can see the 3D, and I absolutely love it. And this is the back. And I want to thank you ever so much for the patience and the understanding. I was heartbroken. This block should have been out 2.5 weeks ago, and no matter what I did, nothing worked. So I want to thank you so very much for your patience, and my goodness, I need a haircut.
Sister to be caught with her tinsel down around her knees.
I want to invite you to please subscribe and click the notification bell and hit that like button. And if you hit the notification bell to all, then you will be notified the next time I put a video out. Thank you ever so much for watching, and I love you all very, very much. Please do yourself a favor and go out and find God today. Go out in your yard, look at the frost on your windshield, look at the snowflakes, look at the grass, the flowers, the trees. Just look for God. Look for a pretty sunrise or sunset, a pretty cloud. He's out there, and he's given us all these amazing, amazing gifts, right down to the fact that no two snowflakes are ever the same. And he's done that because he loves us. So go out there and find God today. I love you all very, very much. God bless.
Good night, Elizabeth.
Good night, John Boy.